ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start with a beracha kedarkenu b'kodesh, lilu nishmat, Sar HaTorah, Hagaon HaTzadik, Harav Shemaryahu, Yosef Haim, Ben Rabbi Yisrael Kanievsky, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech Ha'olam, Sha'akol Nihiyah Bidvaro. Know this. Whatever we say will not do justice, not even a drop in the ocean, from what should be said. And we're here tonight to clarify and understand that we don't understand who we just lost. That's precisely the purpose for tonight's Hespedim. To give us an inkling into someone that we were lucky enough to have in our generation who did not belong amongst us. He was an absolute Hesed Hashem. It was Borei Olam's kindness and mercy that we were able to have someone like the great Rabbi Haim Kanievsky Zatzal amongst us in a generation today. When he was young, only the age of bar mitzvah. At that time, he started to speak and learning with his uncle, the venerable, the great Chazon Ish, already from the Gedolei Hador of the world, let alone Eretz Yisrael. That's right. Know the lineage of the greatness of the great Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal. He was the nephew of the Chazon Ish, the son of the Stipler Gaon, and the son-in-law of the great Rebbe Eliyahu, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha. Wow. I think that really says it all. What else are you going to say after that? At a very young age, at the age of bar mitzvah, the great Reb Chaim Kanievsky, young boy, already made it his business to start speaking and learning divrei halacha she'elot with his uncle, the Chazon Ish. And he would go over to his uncle and speak to him for hours and hours on end in divrei Torah, in sugyot, in Hayoun, in halacha, in learning. The Chazon Ish was so taken by the breadth and width of the bikiut of this young bar mitzvah boy, Reb Chaim, that the Chazon Ish was known that he went to his brother-in-law, the Stipler Gaon, the father of this boy, and he said to the Stipler, Chaim's bikiut is a zecher of the Rogatchover Gaon. Do you know what it is to say a statement like that? Rogatchover Gaon? Do you have any idea who the Rogatchover Gaon was? From the greatest geniuses that ever lived. And the Chazon Ish said on his young nephew at a young age of bar mitzvah that his bikiut was a semblance, a zecher, a reminder of the great Rogatchover Gaon, the genius and giant at that time in Dvinsk. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine that statement? You know, when the great Rabbi Cutler, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha, once was by the Rogatchover Gaon and he was talking to him and learning, the Rogatchover was very, very sharp. And most people were too scared to talk to him and learning. Because after a moment of two of speaking to him, he already saw where you're holding and learning, and he let you know it. So most people were too scared to speak to Rogatchover Gaon. He was very charif, very sharp. Rabbi Aaron Cutler, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha, was speaking to the Rogatchover and learning. And this conversation went on for some time, which most people didn't get that far. And at the end, the Rogatchover was impressed, and he turns to Rabbi Aaron Cutler, and he says, so what do you do for a living? Rabbi Aaron was too embarrassed to say that he was a rabbi. So he said he was a balabat. So the Rogatchover looks at Rabbi Aaron Kotler and says, for a working man, you're not bad in learning. Rabbi Aaron Kotler. Said the Chazon Ish that this young boy Haim, he tells the Stipler Gaon on his son, your son Haim has the semblance, the zecher of the bikiyut of the Rogatchover Gaon. That is unbelievable. And that tells us that we have no clue who the great Reb Chaim Kanievsky was, not at the age of 13, not at the age of 33, 73, or 94. We have no clue. A giant amongst us. Rabotai, Reb Chaim as a boy would sit in the Ezrat Nashim, very young age, and there were people there in the shul that would actually try to tease him. They would come up to him. They saw this boy sitting in the Ezrat Nashim with a Gemara opened at all times. And his finger would go down the page as if he was literally scanning the page. From top to bottom, he would go down the page. And then he would turn the page. And then he would go down again, top to bottom. And then he would turn the page and go down again, page, top to bottom. And people thought it was comical. Look at this young boy, 7, 8 years old, scanning the pages of Gemara as if Ki'ilu they thought he was actually learning. And they would kid around. They would even tease him. To the extent that one time someone went to the Stipler Gaon and he said to him, you know, your son sits in the back and he puts his finger down the pages of Gemara. He puts the finger down the pages of Shulchan Aruch. You know, that's not a game for kids to play. He's being mevazeh the Sfarim. The Stipler looked at the guy and he said to him, you stay away from my son. Leave him. Luz him up. That means leave him. Leave him. You see him going down the pages? One day he's going to know every page by heart. And this is already what the Stipler was telling us about his son, the great Reb Chaim, to be. And Rabotai, when they came to the Stipler Gaon, and they said to him, Harav, the Stipler was known that he had an incredible schedule of learning, and he wouldn't waste a moment, the Stipler Gaon, of course. But when it came to certain things, the Stipler was very makpid, especially when it came to sandakot. When anyone offered him sandak, he would take it. He would even travel for it. On anything else, he wouldn't give up a minute, not a second at a time, when it came to learning. But there was one thing, when it came to being sandak, he would never let an opportunity go by. And Rabbi, we should take lesson from this. I think we should appreciate this incredible zichut of being sandak in your life once, twice, your child, your grandchild. Don't take it lightly. It's an incredible zichut to be sandak. And be careful with the person you choose to be sandak of your child. Because it's brought in Divrei Kabbalah that the sandak has a tremendous influence on the baby of who that child one day is going to be, on his mazal, on his yirat shamayim. So be careful who you give sandak to your child, Brit Milah. And now you understand why so many people in Bnei Brak would come running and they would beg the Gadol at that time, the great Stipler Gaon, to be sandak. The Stipler would get sandakaut Mondays and Thursdays constantly. Mamash. He got it hundreds of times. And he would travel all over Bnei Brak and even further just for the opportunity to be sandak. Sandak again. One time a person came and asked him, said, Harav, you told us, and we know, that the kibud of being sandak by Brit Milah is an amazing sigula for ashirut. And you told us it's badukum nuseh. If you take a look in the Karnata de Igrita, written by the Stipler Gaon, how he talks about this concept, how it's baduk minuseh, tried and proven, that someone who's sandak the right way, you come to me afterwards, I'll tell you what the right way is. You'll be surprised. It has to be done the right way. But when it's done the right way, It is a guarantee for ashirut, for the sandak. So they came to the stipler and they said, Harav, you did sandakaut hundreds of times. Where's the ashirut? The stipler lived in the most simple of simplicity, in a small little apartment, with nothing fancy, with absolutely what you saw. Where's the ashirut? You told us. It's a guarantee. Nobody got it more than you. Said the stipler Gaon. How do you define ashirut? Ashirut is the wealth of what it means to you. What is your ashirut? Sandakut brings to a person a guarantee of the ashirut of what ashirut is to you. If ashirut is money to you, then that's what you'll get. But that's only what you'll get. If ashirut is something else to you, then that's the ashirut you were blessed with. And it was at that moment that the stipler turned to the makshin, the guy that asked him the question, and he took him by the arm, and he pulled him back to the back of the shul, and he said to him, you want to see my ashirut? You want to see the blessing of the guarantee of all the sandakaut that I sat? And he brings him to the back of the shul, and he points to a young boy. He said, my Haim, that's my ashirut. He is the ashirut of all the sandakaut. He's the blessing from Shamayim that Borei Olam gave me. Shh. Wow. And he was a blessing to Klal Yisrael, not just to the stipler Gaon. He was a blessing to all of us. And how Reb Haim sat literally hours upon hours upon hours with unbelievable patience, and people would come up 23 Rashbam, and they would make it up those steps, and they would fight their way to get up another step, till they finally got up to the top to the door, and then finally someone would call their name and squeeze them through the crowds and get him to the back room, and there's Reb Haim. And Reb Haim had the patience to go through the tsarot of people and listen and give them birachot and buha day and night. Mamash. His chovot were only a few hours. His chovot, which he called his time for learning, that he finished every year on Erev Pesach, he made siyum of kol haTorah kula. We don't even know what that means. We don't even know what kol haTorah kula means, let alone to be Messiahit. But he was Messiah Babli and Yerushalmi and Rambam and Sifri and Sifra and Mishnah Brura and Mishnayot. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the list goes on and on and on. And Zohar. And Kol HaTorah Kula. He finished it. Siyum. Every year. Erev Pesach. And then besides that, he still had time for people. And he sat hours upon hours on end, receiving us and giving chizuk and birachot and divrei nevuah. One time they asked Reb Haim, why do you spend so much time Kabbalat Kahal? You're putting even more time to the tzibur than your father did. And you know what Reb Haim answered? He said in Hebrew, Ulai bizchut zeh anachnu Haim. Did you hear that? Ulai bizchut zeh anachnu Haim. Maybe this is the zechut of longevity. Maybe God gives us a longer life with more time in this world for the sake of others, so that we could spend time not just on our own accomplishments, but the accomplishments of giving chizuk to those in Klal Yisrael who desperately need it. The broken hearts of Israel. Maybe that's my zechut to continue to live, said Reb Haim. You think I'm doing them the favor. It's ke'ilu they're giving me the zechut to go on with life. But that's the way a gadol looks. Gedolim, it's never about what they're looking to get from you. Gedolim, the gadlut, is always about how much can I give you instead. Not what I can get from you, what I can give to you. That's always what gadlut was when it comes to the great gedolim. And every minute, every second to Reb Haim counts. You know that many of those pictures you're going to see on the different programs, you'll see, especially in later years, Reb Haim is always sitting by a Gemara, always, in all the pictures. He's always sitting. You couldn't catch him. He's always sitting by a Gemara. And there it was, with his index card, situated perfectly in the middle of the Daf Gemara, and he would have the index card go down the page, line by line by line, as he would read and memorize, going down the page of Gemara, line by line with his index card. One time someone asked him, Harav, why do you use an index card to sit and learn? Why don't you go down the page with your finger? And Reb Haim answered, when you go down the page with your finger, sometimes you tend to skip a line. And at that moment, you realize that you skipped the line. So it takes you a second to chop that what you just read doesn't flow with what you're reading. So you jump back to the previous line to catch back to the line you're really up through, and that wastes a second of Torah learning. Says Reb Haim, I don't have that second to waste. And therefore, when I learn with an index card. So when it goes down the page, I'm sure never to skip a line and not to waste a second of Torah learning. Do you see what a second of Torah meant to the great Sar HaTorah, the great Reb Haim Kanievsky Zatzal? I can't believe I'm saying the word Zatzal. It still didn't register by me. It still didn't sink in yet. How did we lose Reb Haim? How do we go on without him? But every moment, every second to him counted. But from those seconds, he was ready to give up his days, to hear the cries of Klal Yisrael and the worries and the broken hearts, and give them the time. Because in the words of the venerable, great Reb Haim, Ulai bizchut zeh anachnu Haim. It's for the people that we're getting longevity, we get life. Amazing. I'd like to tell you for a moment my first encounter, the first time I met the great Reb Haim Kanievsky. It's a moment I'll never forget. It's over 20 years ago. I came to Eretz Yisrael, and I called a good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Reb Nosson Yafi. He's the one who runs Kupat Ha'ir in Bnei Brak. We became friends because of the wonderful Chinese auctions that they made here in the community. I used to speak for them a little bit, and we became close. I come to Eretz Yisrael. I say, Nosson, I never met Reb Haim Kanievsky, Zatzal. Can you get me in? He says, absolutely. Meet me by 23 Rashbam at this and this hour, and I'll take you in. So I come up the steps on time. Nosson Yafi is running down the block. Reb Duvi, you have a pen? You have a paper? I said, a pen? A paper? Why? He says, you have to write down what exactly it is that we want to ask. I said, really? I said, that's the way Reb Chaim gives berachot. I said, I know by the Rebbes they do that, but Reb Chaim is more of like a Rosh HaYeshiva style. You talk to him, you tell him your issue, he gives you the blessing. He says, yeah. He says, but the first time you see Reb Chaim, I'm advising you from experience, from the many people that I brought into him. The first time you meet him and go into him, write down what you want to say. Because I am telling you, many, many people, the first time they saw Reb Chaim in real life, they were shell-shocked. There's an or, there was a magnificent glow on his face, and your brain goes blank. Blank. I was looking, I was like, oh, okay. I said, Duvi, let me just write it down. So, okay. I took out the paper. I wrote down all the points I wanted. I'm holding it. We go inside. There was no Kabbalat Kahal at that time. Reb Chaim was actually sitting in the back, sitting and learning by a table. I walked in with Nosson Yafi. And as I walk into the room, I look at him and I was like, wow. And I'm telling you, pshuto kimashmao. My brain went blank. I'm telling you, I did not remember my name at the moment. And he turns to me and he says to me, Reb Haim looks up from the Gemara. He says to me, go ahead. Tell Reb Haim what you need. And I was a humming. And Nassim smiles and he says, you see? He walks up and he pulls the paper, pries it out from my fingers, puts it down on Reb Chaim's desk. Reb Chaim goes through each one. And I'm telling you, there was such a glow. The room was lit up. His face was shining. It was an experience of the first time of standing in front of Gadol Hador, and you see mamash kishemesh acharei tzahorayim. I came to, I snapped out. And Reb Chaim started giving blessings on each of the points that I had on the paper, till finally I mustered myself back up. And I looked at the great Sar HaTorah, and I said to myself, I'm going to do this. I hope this is not going to come off chutzpahdik. But who else can I ask this question? You know, they used to ask the Navi of the generation the following question. And I said, Harav, with my broken Yiddish, Harav, tell me, what is my tafkid for my neshama in this world? What am I here to do in this world? What's my job? Tell me what my chiyuv in this world to accomplish. And at that minute, Nassim Yafi's jaw dropped. And he looked at me like, you didn't just ask that. I said, yeah, I said, Navi Hador, this is what you ask. You can't ask anybody else. Reb Chaim looks up from the Gemara, and he told me, word for word. He didn't even bat an eyelash. He didn't even pause. It was like toch kedei dibor. The minute I asked him, what is my purpose in this world? What was I put here to do? He said it on the spot, and he minced no words. Wow, was that experience. I kissed his hand. I made my way out. And I'm telling you, that night I did not sleep. It was the first time I was ever there. And ever since, I went, I don't know how many times, and every time the experience was surreal, including this past January. This past January, when we were by Reb Haim and we saw him for the last time. And he was very, very weak. Borei Olam was mizakeh us to see somebody that makes a siyum al kol haTorah kula. I mean, this was unbelievable. And I'm sure you're going to be hearing now the incredible stories that are going to come out, the books that are going to come out, and they're going to blow your living mind. The stories that they say over about Reb Haim is the stories of Nevi'ut, nothing less. I'm sure you heard that story about that young boy in Bnei Brak that came in with his father, and the father was asking Reb Haim, is it okay to cut the boy's hair even though he's not 3 years old yet? The upsharon, which is normally done by many of the Ashkenazim at 3 years old. And Reb Haim says, why not? And he says, because the boy was just diagnosed with a brain tumor. We don't know if he's going to make it to the third birthday. Can we cut his hair now? And Reb Haim smiled and said, don't cut his hair. He's going to make it to his third birthday. He's going to have arichut yamim b'shani. And then he calls to the Rebbitzin, bring the wine from the siyum of Kol HaTorah. And they bring out the wine. Reb Chaim tells the boy to drink the wine. He makes a beracha with him. The boy drinks the wine from the siyum that Reb Chaim made on Babli, Yerushalmi, Sifri, Sifra, Rambam, Mishnah Berurah, Mishnayot, Zohar. And the boy drinks the wine. 2 weeks later, the father comes back to the house. I heard this from one of the Shamoshim over there in the house, and the father was crying and dancing, do it himself. His child just came back from MRI. Klum! They said to Reb Chaim, is this a moifis? Is this a miracle? This is a mofet, right? There's a mofet. Is a mofet? Chaim said, not mofet, no. He says, what, mofet? He says, the Torah is Etz Chaimi. And when I gave him the wine from the siyum of Kol HaTorah, the Torah, the Etz Chaim, entered the boy, and it simply did what any Etz Chaim would do. Got rid of the problem, ba'arichut yamim v'shanim. It was pasha to him. You're going to hear these stories. You're going to hear stories that are going to literally blow our minds. But this is going to be the semblance and the remembrance of who we had and who we lost. This past January, my brother-in-law spent a Friday night meal by the great Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, Shalita, Arichut Yamim Mishanim. And he was going around getting blessings for his daughter to get married. And Rabbi Yaakov Hillel asked him, so which rabbis did you go to? And he starts telling him, I went to this tzaddik and this tzaddik and that tzaddik, and this one gave me a blessing. Rabbi Yaakov asked him, did you go to Rabbi Haim? He said, yes, I went to Rabbi Haim too. What did he say? He said, Buha Mazal Tov. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel says, if that's the case, Mazal Tov. He said, but Harav, I told you I went to this rabbi and this rabbi and this rabbi. I went to the biggest rabbis. He says, yeah. He says, all those rabbis you mentioned, what they gave you are berachot. But Reb Chaim gave you divrei nevuah. That was the difference between him and everybody else. He was the Urim v'Tumim of Klal Yisrael. Mamash, the Urim v'Tumim. The Navi Hador. And his words were divrei nevuah. To have that. And you look back now and you say to yourself, when my son's bar mitzvah took place in Israel, I took my Yitzchak Zev at 13 years old to Reb Chaim. It was in August. It was 102 degrees in Bnei Brak the day we walked into Reb Chaim's house to get a blessing for my son, Yitzchak Zev. 102 degrees. American boy walks into Reb Chaim. How do you think he's dressed? With a short sleeve shirt, right? I mean, it's 102 degrees. So my son and my son-in-law, Ramiz, we walk in together to Reb Chaim. And Reb Chaim looks up and he smiles. And I ask him for a beracha for my son, his bar mitzvah. And Reb Chaim starts laughing and he says to me, there isn't enough money in America to find a little bit more material for long sleeve shirts. We were laughing. So I took off my jacket and I put it on my son. He was standing there with sleeves going down to his ankles. And that's when Reb Chaim gave him the blessing. My son-in-law asked him for a blessing for a baby boy. They just got married. And Reb Chaim said, what's wrong with girls? Reb Chaim, he was in a very happy, laughing mood. And my son-in-law said, nothing. I'll take any beracha that the Rav gives. So the rabbi gave him a blessing. You should have 12 girls and 12 boys. And my son-in-law looked at me, and I looked back at him. And what's amazing is that just a day or so ago, he just had his third boy. And we're asking Borei Olam and the zechut of the great Reb Chaim that these boys should grow up to be great Talmidei Chachamim. Reb Chaim had a love, and he had an unbelievable softness for Klal Yisrael amongst his greatness. So I want to close with this idea. Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, he tells us that Maisa, that story that everybody knows. When Reb Chaim wrote the book Karnei Chagavim, he wrote that book. You know, Reb Chaim would write Sfarim in areas of Torah that nobody really had much of an idea about. In order to revive those areas of Torah, he used to call those areas Met Mitzvah. And he was coming to save them and revive them and bring them back to Klal Yisrael. So one area, he wrote a book on grasshoppers, on locusts, what was kosher and what's not. And over there, as he's writing the Sefer, there was one very rare and unique grasshopper. And he was writing about it, but he had a safek on this particular grasshopper. And just then, this very rare grasshopper jumps through the window and lands right on the table of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And Reb Chaim picks him up and examines him. And after he finishes examining this very rare grasshopper, he finishes writing the notes, the grasshopper takes off. He had that amazing siyata deshmaya, but you think that that's the end of the story. Reb Gedalia Reb Gedalia Honigberg, in his Sefer, writes the end of a story that nobody really knows. There was an expert in Israel on chagavim, on grasshoppers and locusts, that came to challenge Reb Chaim Kanievsky's Sefer, saying that he got the nature of certain grasshoppers that he wrote about in the Sefer wrong. And this guy was the number one guy. And he comes now to Reb Chaim, and he tells Reb Chaim that he got all these things wrong about certain locusts and grasshoppers. And Reb Chaim had such agmat nefesh. He was so upset, he was so hurt. He spent put so much examination, analysis to put out this Sefer. And now this expert is telling him he got it wrong. Just then, this very grasshopper that they were being mitvakeach, which is a very rare, very seldomly found anywhere in the world, this particular grasshopper jumps through the window and came back. Landed right on Reb Chaim's hand. Reb Chaim looks at the expert who is standing there, Hiloni, and he tells him, is this the one you're talking about? You told me I'm wrong. Let's examine him together. It's like unbelievable. And they examined and they found out Reb Chaim was right. Expert was wrong. Exactly the way he brought it in the Sefer. Reb Chaim gave hakarat hatov to this little guy and sent him off. Because that is someone who, when he has a handle on Sar HaTorah, he has a handle on the reality of the entire world. And that's who we lost. He was the great wall of Klal Yisrael, the Shmirah of a generation. Rabotai, the wall of our Shmirah just came down. A tremendous vacuum of Torah learning was just lost. The vacuum was created. The volume of Torah learning was lost. We're going to need a whole nation to make up one Gadol's Torah learning. Could you think about that for a minute? We're going to need a whole nation to take upon themselves a little bit more learning, spread out thin over millions of Jews, to try to be able to fill the void of one Reb Chaim Kanievsky's learning, to make up one great Gadol's learning. But we need it, because our Torah is the wall of our protection. It's magle umatzle. Magne umatzle. Torah is our protection. And when we lose a giant of Torah, we lost the wall. Beten chelkeinu b'toratecha. We lost Reb Chaim's chelek in Torah. He was a wall of his own for the entire Klal Yisrael. And now that wall came down. We, every one of us, needs to grab a brick and line it with mortar and step up and do your part to put this wall back up quick. Because we need the Shmirah today in Klal Yisrael desperately. And I want to tell you a beautiful thought, and I'll let you go. You know that that's Reb Chaim's chelek in Torah. And when you step up to fill that chelek now that he's no longer here, you actually will reconnect to what the tzaddik's life mission was. You're going to pick up his wall, his mission, his Torah. You connect to him. You remember the days we stood online and waited to get up those steps? You don't have to wait online now. Grab a Gemara, Le'ilui Nishmat, Shemaryahu, Yosef Haim, Kanievsky, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha, and pick up the learning where he left it, so that Klal Yisrael can continue the shmir of our Torah. But now, like the Rebbe said, Keli, Keli, lama zavtani. That was the moment that Esther lost her Ruach HaKodesh. And that was the day that we lost the tzaddik amongst us that had Ruach HaKodesh. That was the day that we lost the great Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And like the great rabbi, the Rebbe in Israel said, Hashem, on Purim, we sent you the most magnificent Mishloach Manot. Reb Chaim himself, we're waiting for you to return to us the Mishloach Manot. We're waiting for you to return to us the gift of Mashiach Tzidkenu. All right. Yeah.
Beruchim habayim, everybody. Rabbis tell us that Yehoshua was buried on a mountain called Har Ga'ash. And our rabbis said there's no such mountain called Har Ga'ash. What does it mean that he was buried on a mountain called Har Ga'ash? Har Ga'ash means volcanic eruption. After Yehoshua bin Nun, our leader, the prized Talmid of Moshe Rabbeinu, passed away, there was a volcanic eruption because Bnei Yisrael did not mispeed him, they did not eulogize him correctly. And this week and this month and this year, Bnei Yisrael have a very big responsibility to mispeed the Gadol Hador properly. It is beyond us to do, but it is something that we have a tremendous requirement to do. And it is asur to mezalzel in the hesped of a gadol, let alone a gadol hador, let alone any Talmid Chacham, let alone tzar haTorah. I know in the shul they're trying Be'ezat Hashem every single day, starting from Sunday. They started every single day between Mincha and Arbit. They're going to have Hespedim in the shul. This cannot go like, okay, we lost the Gadol Hador. We'll watch the Levaya. We'll hear a Hesped and on with our life. Has v'shalom. This is supposed to shake us. Morav Rabotai, this is really supposed to shake us. Shamayim. If Mina Shamayim, Borei Olam, he took the Gadol Hador, this is a very scary time for Bnei Yisrael. So I'm going to want to share a thought with you, take it with a grain of salt. Anyone that knows our Jewish calendar, if you're able to learn how it works, it's unbelievable. It's a beautiful system. It's very systematic. Everything blends and meshes together beautifully. Everything has a reason and there's a rhyme to everything that happens. Why holidays fall on a certain time and why holidays do not fall on a certain time. Why the year is leap, why a month is leaped. Everything is so beautifully coordinated, how Hachamim set up our calendar. There's something very interesting about the Hebrew calendar. And that is that there are two holidays that every single year, they're going to fall on the same day. And these two holidays are Purim and Lag BaOmer. Purim and Lag BaOmer, as a rule in our calendar, they will always fall on the same exact day every single year. Last year, anyone remember when Purim was? Purim in Brooklyn was on a Friday. Anyone remember when Lag BaOmer was? Lag BaOmer was a Thursday night, Friday. And the siman to this says, the Shulchan Aruch, is the word plag. Plag ha-mincha. Plag is Rashi Tevot, Pe, Purim, Lamed Gimel, Lag BaOmer. Plag, Purim, Lag BaOmer, they always fall out every single year on the same day. This year, Purim was on a Thursday. You don't have to be a genius. Lag BaOmer is going to fall out on Thursday. And if you don't believe me, you can check the calendar. Plag is the rule. And the question is, what does Purim and Lag BaOmer have in common? It's a beautiful rule, but why do they have to fall on the same day? And the answer is, I don't know. But something that I know about these 2 days is very amazing. And that is that Lag BaOmer is a very symbolic day. Lag BaOmer is a day that beyond Rashbi has obviously significance before Rashbi passed away on that day, and it's a phenomenal day. And what that day represents is our preparation to Matan Torah. You see, there's 49 days from Pesach until Shavuot. Every third of these 49 days, we're working on one of the three things that the Torah stands on, that the world stands on. Al Shelosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed. Al Torah, Ve'al Ha'avodah, Ve'al Gemilut Chasadim. The world stands on three pillars: Torah, Avodah, Korbanot, Tefillah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Those are the three pillars that the world stands on. And every third of the 49-day period, we are working on one of the three pillars that the world stands on. So the first 16 and a third days, we're working on one of these pillars. On the second 16 and third of these days, we're working on the second pillar. On the last 16 and third of these days, we're beginning our final ascent to the Matan Torah, to accepting the Torah. And that last stretch of 16 and a third days begins on Lag BaOmer, and that is when we go full force on the Torah. Lag BaOmer is a time that we are celebrating the last ascent towards Matan Torah, getting ready for our holy Torah. Lag BaOmer is a time that we are celebrating the Torah in a way. Purim is a day that we are celebrating the Torah as well. Lag BaOmer, we are receiving the Torah shebichtav on Shavuot. And on Purim, we accepted the Torah shebe'al peh. Hadar kibluha be'ahava. They accepted the Torah shebe'al peh. Divrei hachamim na'aseh v'nishma. Purim and Lag BaOmer, they share a lot in common. These are the days of the year that we are re-accepting the Torah, Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh upon ourselves. These are very symbolic days and very important days, needless to say, for Am Yisrael. How sad it is that last Lag BaOmer turned into a Tisha B'Av, and the previous Purim turned into a Tisha B'Av. Our days of happiness, the happiest days of the year, Lag BaOmer and Purim, of the happiest days, the Pelag, they have been taken away from us back to back. That's a very scary thing. Lag BaOmer, all of a sudden, forget the dancing, shut the music. Purim, what in the world is Purim? The Gadol Hador was taken away from us. And the question is, why have our happy days become days of evil recently? The happiest of times, it's not coincidental that exactly on Purim and Lag BaOmer, the tragedies happened. Min HaShamayim, Borei Olam could have waited another day. No, he didn't. Borei Olam wanted it to happen on Lag BaOmer and on Purim, when Bnei Yisrael are very festive, and our happy times were taken away. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe, because instead of celebrating these days the right way, realizing what Lag BaOmer is and what Purim is, appreciating our holy Torah, appreciating the Torah and realizing that without Torah we have nothing. It's not just a day to be happy and to jump around the bonfire. That's not what Lag BaOmer is. Purim's not a day to just be happy and let's just dance and have a party and dance in a circle and drink. Has v'shalom. That's not what Purim is. That's not what Lag BaOmer is. You think there's no meaning in our holidays? You think in the dancing there's no meaning? You think in our celebration it's supposed to be hefkerut and holelut and meaningless and reckless dancing? God forbid. It's supposed to be full of simchat HaTorah these days. And if they weren't full of simchat HaTorah, then maybe Borei Olam is taking them away because the partying is not done the right way. The mentality in these beautiful days is not there. Our celebration of the Torah is not being celebrated the right way. And we're being reminded when the Gadol Hador passes away what it's really all about. It's all about the Torah. And if we don't realize that it's all about the Torah, when we lose the Sar HaTorah, the Gadol Hador, that's supposed to hit home and remind us what we are here to do. The Gadol Hador, what they offer us amongst the infinite things, amongst the amazing things that they offer Klal Yisrael, is clarity, focus. Because as we come into this world, we could forget our mission. We could forget our tafkid. We could forget what we are here to do. When we have a gadol that has that clarity all the time, I'm here to serve Borei Olam and nothing else matters to me. That is what Rav Chaim represented to us. The clarity that we're supposed to have in our Avodat Hashem. I'm here to learn Torah, perform the beautiful mitzvot, get close to Borei Olam. That's what he did his entire life. That's all he cared about. And that's all that mattered to him. Cars didn't make a difference. Vacations didn't make a difference. Houses didn't make a difference. Nothing made a difference to the rabbi. He had the clarity. And then he could come into this world, and all of a sudden, we're running a rat race. It's about the next vacation, Thanksgiving, and after Thanksgiving, winter vacation, we're going Pesach, after Pesach, Shavuot, we're going for the summer, back to Labor Day weekend, and our whole year, we're running around vacations. We're running after cars. Chas Shalom, nobody here. But that's what someone might be able to do when they get lost in such a wild world. It becomes about the money. It becomes about the houses. You only have one house, you have another house. No, I'm working on that. And the pressure that people have over emptiness and nothingness and vanities. The olam hasheker that people could get fooled by. Vayilchu aharei hahevel vayehebalu. They're going after emptiness. And there's nothing there. It's a figment of your imagination. And the Gadol Hador is the one that has it clear in his mind. And the Gadol and the Gedolei Hador, they're the ones that show us the way. And they're the ones that are supposed to lead us the way. And we're supposed to follow them like sheep after the shepherd. Looking at them for the right focus, for the right mentality that we're supposed to be having in our life. And when we lose the Sar HaTorah, that could take away from our focus. And we can start forgetting what we are here to do. And our leader, and our or, and our light has been taken away. Hayoun Rabbi Yaakov Ad Shalita. He says, imagine you're in a movie theater. Chas v'shalom. Mashal. Imagine you're in a movie theater. Pitch black. Everyone is sitting. They're all looking at the screen. And you walk in. And you go to the back and you flick the switch. All of a sudden the light goes on. And everyone that's facing that way, all of a sudden, they turn around. Hey, who put on the lights? What are you doing? Shut the light, shut the light. What do you mean shut the light? The screen is there. You were looking till now. Keep on looking. We can't see anything. We cannot see the screen. The light is on. What does that mean? How in the world does that make sense? The light is on so you cannot see? In what world does that make sense? Only in the world of darkness. When you're in the dark world and there's no light, then you see the cops and the robbers and everyone is shooting and the banks and the cars and everything looks so real. Wow, what a screen, unbelievable. Look at the movie. It's so real. The second you put on the light, there's nothing there. There's an empty wall. The light is our Torah. Kiner misvah veTorah, or a person could go through life and he could see everything. It looks so real, unbelievable. Wow. Look at the cars and the houses and the vacations. It's hadid. This is unbelievable. This is sick. This is life. This is real. C'est la vie. This is not nothing. This is emptiness. This is hevel. You want to see how fake it is? Just put on the light. Learn Torah. Bring Torah into your life and you realize how nothing else really makes a difference. You won't care about anything else. You realize how all that was emptiness. When the Gadol Hador has that clarity, which they do, Baruch Hashem, teaching it to us, that is something unbelievable that we're supposed to emulate and learn from. And when the Gadol Hador is taken away, What a loss it is to Bnei Yisrael. The direction, the clarity, our focus, our leader, our shepherd has been taken away. We are sheep wandering now, and we need the direction. And Baruch Hashem lo alman Yisrael, we have our tzaddikim, but very clearly a very big one was taken away. The rabbi cannot be replaced. The rabbi's greatness in Torah, how could that be replaced? Only Borei Olam can replace it. And what we have to realize is to emulate the rabbi's tremendous ahavat Torah, the rabbi's clarity that he had. Many people could think, I'm not the rabbi. Phenomenal stories. I'm not a Navi. I can't emulate the rabbi. That's not true. That's not what the rabbi would want you to think. You could for sure emulate the rabbi. And we all have to learn from the rabbi. How Torah is the ikar in our life. It's all about the Torah. And when you have Torah, all of a sudden, you start realizing you don't care about anything else. All the outside world is emptiness. I just want more Torah. Learning from the rabbi to put more Torah into our life. You know, not many people know. But Rav Haim used to say about himself that he had a lot of debt. Yesh li harbe chovot. His son-in-law once saw him outside. He was learning Torah under a lamppost. He had the sefer, learning under a lamppost. His son-in-law passed. He said, Daddy, Abba, what are you doing outside? Why don't you go inside? The family's sleeping. He doesn't want to open the light to disturb them and wake them up. So that's why he doesn't want to learn inside. So he's coming outside to learn Torah under a lamppost. And he says, I have a lot of chovot. Yesh li harbe chovot. I have a lot of debt. You have debt? The Gadol Hador has debt? In a second, anyone hears that the Gadol Hador has debt? Haz v'shalom. Rabbi, how many zeros on the check? The rabbi didn't need our money. He's not talking about debt monetarily. Yesh li harbe chovot. I have a lot of debt in my Torah. The rabbi, what he did, is what businessmen do. Lehavdil, elef afei havdalot. A businessman goes to work, and when he goes to work, he thinks, I have to make this and this amount of money today. And if I don't, I lost. I got to make a lot of money today. And I have to make this amount of sales. And I have to make this amount of profit. And I got to look at the end of the day at my bank account. And I got to see how much I have exactly over there. They pursue monetary world. They have a debt if they don't get what they want to pursue. The rabbi, he geared that towards Torah. Every day he has a debt. He wants to learn 7.5 dapim of Shas, a certain amount of Zohar, a certain amount of Midrashim, a certain amount of Sifra, a certain amount of Sifri, a certain amount of Mishnayot, a certain amount of Shulchan Aruch, Tur Beit Yosef. And he has this debt that he put on himself every single day. And he doesn't want to go to sleep until he finishes his daily quota. That is his debt. That is the real world that the rabbi is living in. That is the Olam HaEmet. That is the world that is full of Torah, that is full of or, that is full of light, that is connecting to Borei Olam. And instead of running after emptiness, how much am I missing in my bank account? We should be thinking, how much am I missing in my spiritual bank account in Shamayim? How much more Torah do I need? When is the last time I went to sleep thinking that I fulfill my daily quota of Torah? By the Gedolim? By the rabbi? No such thing, just going to sleep on a pillow. Where's your Torah? Where's your Torah? And that's something that all of us are able to do. To put some type of hitchayvut, responsibility, obligation. I can't maybe do 7.5 daf yet. I can't do the whole Zohar every year. I can't do the whole Tur Beit Yosef every year. But you know what? I could add a chip on my shoulder. A nice, comfortable one, and say, you know what, I'm not going to sleep tonight before I finish one Mishnah. I'm not going to sleep tonight before I learn half my Amud of Gemara. I'm not going to sleep tonight before I make sure I learn a few halachot that I have to learn every single day. That could be our chovot. That could be our debt. But we have to feel that we are in debt. We have to feel like we are lacking. The rabbi had that. And the rabbi clearly was zocheh to be our light, our reminder, what our focus is, what our mission is. And when our shepherd is taken away, אנשי אמונה עבדו, באים בכוח מעשיהם, גיבורים לעמוד בפרץ, דוחים את הגזרות. צדיק, מוריי ורבותיי, it didn't really hit us yet. It really didn't hit us what is happening. I think we're a little confused. We're dazed. I think we're too much in America, thinking the rabbi is still on Rehov Rashbam. How clarity was taken away, or could be taken away when the Gadol is taken away. And what we have to do is to keep our focus, Morav Rabotai. We have to make sure that we're going to have the right clarity in such a dark world where so many people are running after nothing. Learning from the rabbi. Look what he's running after. His dad is in Torah. He wakes up and he goes to sleep thinking Torah, breathing Torah, loving Torah, realizing it's all about the Torah. That is the Gedolim. They're always thinking about the world, the real world, the Olam Ha'emet. You know, Rav Steinman, another Gadol that was taken not too long ago, also from Bnei Brak. He was once traveling on a plane one of the times, and he was going through the security. So as he was going through, it started beeping. So the officer said, Rabbi, please, if you could please step back. The Gabayim explained to the rabbi to step back. He steps back. And they tell him, do you have anything metal on you? Rabbi, metal? What? Nothing. I don't have anything metal on me. He goes through again. Officer says, Rabbi, please go back. The rabbi goes back. You have any metal on you? That's where they're stopping. He's the last person I would stop getting on a plane. Mahmoud and all these Reshayim, they go, don't worry about it. Things beep, 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 beeping away, no problem. The Gadol Ador, okay, go back. And then you would have bet, what does he have in his pocket? Unbelievable. Olam HaSheker. They say again, Rabbi, do you have anything in your pockets? He says, I don't have anything in my pockets. What's the problem? Why is it beeping? He says, you have something metal and it's detecting it. And the rabbi says, oh. Rav Steinmetz says, a few years ago, he had an operation. They put maybe some metal piece in his knee or something. And because of that, that's why it's beeping. So they explained that to the officer. And the officer said, oh, okay, if that's the case, no problem. And he let the rabbi go right through. And all of a sudden, the rabbi gets to the other side and he starts crying. Crying like a little baby. He's crying and crying and crying. And the Gabayim, they felt so bad for the rabbi. They said, Rabbi, Mehila, we didn't want to make you cry. Next time we're going to make sure this doesn't happen. We're not going to delay you again. Mehila, Rabbi, please forgive us. He says, I'm not crying about that. So what are you crying about, Rabbi? He says, if to get onto a plane, you got to go through a metal detector and the smallest piece of metal, it's going to detect and it's going to start beeping and you're not going to be allowed to go onto the plane until you get rid of that metal. Can you imagine in front of Olam Haba, the metal detector that's going to be there? Everyone thinks, Hineni, I did a few mitzvot. Habibi, there's a metal detector. The smallest detection of Averot. What do you think it's going to do? Beep, 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 beep. It's going to start beeping. Don't get discouraged, chas v'shalom. Doesn't mean that a person's not going to make it to Olam Haba. But the rabbi took the musar. Rav Steinman took the musar and he said, if I have to make sure I have no metal on me before I go onto a plane, then how important it is for a person to make sure before their entrance into Olam Haba, they have no avirot. Staying focused in our life is what the Gedolim teach us to do. We live in Olam HaSheker. Have it very clear. If you're around people that are valuing you for where you're spending your vacation and your holidays, and what kind of car you drive, and the size of your house, that's not who Rav Haim is. He will not grade you for that. If you want to be his friend, you got a friend. He will love you for the fact that you are a Jew, and you have a neshama, and you are holy, and you have potential, and you can get close to Hashem. That is your true worth. Not what the bank says. Friends that value you for that, that's not what our Gedolim would do. They had the clarity. They knew the emet. They would live in a small 2-bedroom apartment with a rundown kitchen, and they wouldn't care about anything. Only Borei Olam, Torah, and Bnei Yisrael. Kucha birichu Yisrael ve'oraita. That is it. And that is the Olam ha'emet that we have to get into. That is the Olam ha'emet that we have to tap into and get closer to that side and farther away from the wrong side. By making more time for Torah, more time for mitzvot, more time to be next to the Hachamim, and less time away from the Sheker and the Hevel. And the more we have the Or, the Torah in our life, the more you're going to see the cops and robbers, they dissipate. Hevel. We say, V'harish'a kula be'ashan tichle. Tefillah of Yamim Noraim. The Sefer Siftei Haim. He says, what does it mean, V'harish'a kula be'ashan tichle? Why is the rish'ut, the wickedness, compared to smoke? Rav Chaim Friedlander says, if you see smoke from far, if you see fog from far, it looks so real. When you go close to it and you go into it, you realize there's nothing there. The rish'ut is the same thing. The avirot is the same thing. From far, it looks, wow, this is real, this is exciting, this is geshmak, this is adir. And you get close to it and you realize this is nothing. This is efes. This is rek. Borei Olam put us in this beautiful world to get close to Him, to enjoy this world through the Torah, through the mitzvot, through the dveikut to Borei Olam. We lost the Rabbi, we lost our clarity. But we have to remember what the Rabbi represented. And we have to emulate the Rabbi. We have to learn from the Rabbi. And like the Rabbi said, you're going to hear a lot of beautiful stories. Don't think this is beyond me. We can do it. On our own level, everyone has a responsibility to now pitch in more and to fill in that void of Torah and say, I'm going to make more time for Torah. Maybe I can't do on his caliber, but I'm going to do my part because I could do my part and I have to do my part. Imagine there was a Hatzalah member over here and someone was fainting. He needed a cup of water, just a cup of water. So everyone starts screaming, hey, Hatzalah, Hatzalah. What Hatzalah, Habibi? Take a bottle of water that you see the guy needs water and give it to him. You don't need to be a Hatzalah to get him a cup of water. You don't need to be a Hatzalah to put a band-aid on the guy. Help the guy out. Sometimes in life we think, let's wait for the tzaddikim to do it. Let's wait for the gedolim to do it. Let's wait for them to save us. We can do it ourselves. We have to do it ourselves. We're also able to give someone a cup of water. We're also able to fill up the Torah. We're also able to do what we have to. If we're just sitting back and relaxing and thinking, it's not for me, this is not for me, these are beautiful stories that we can hear about the Rabbi, but it's not for me, this is not me. It's not true, this is us. He's not an exception to the generation in the Avodat Hashem. It's exceptional, of course, but this is what we all have to be emulating. This is our shepherd. And now we're a sheep without a ro'eh. V'lo alman Yisrael. Hashem takes care of Bnei Yisrael. But we have to make sure to do what we have to do. I'll leave you off with the words of the Ya'arot Tevash. And he says, Ki zohi tachlit ha'evel ve'abechi ve'asped. The whole purpose of the crying and the mourning and the eulogizing. Baharatat chet ve'kabalat teshuvah ve'esek ha'torah asher hisam chayim. The whole purpose of mourning and eulogizing is to do teshuvah and to mitchazek in Torah. Ve'az yafeh lanu ha'bechi ve'adem. And then what you're doing is beautiful. But if chas ve'shalom, aval im ein adam metaher atzmo mechet ve'fesha, they're going to hear words of eulogies, and they're not going to change. They're going to stay with their avirot, and they're not going to mitchazek. U'bochet, they'll cry. He says, if they're not changing, bichiyah zo bichiyah shel Esav harasha. This is the tears of Esav. V'noten koach l'samech aleph chas v'shalom. The purpose of hearing about the Rabbi and eulogizing the Rabbi is to learn from the Rabbi and to make a change. Clearly, I'm speaking to myself. To make a change in our life, in my life. To think, how can I better myself? To get more into the world of Torah, into the real world, and get out of the olam ha-sheker that people are living in. Making sure that that's not going to be the Yehudim. Macha Hashem demam al kol panim. Be'ezrat Hashem, the Rabbi should be a melitz yosher. for all Bnei Yisrael, will be zochet to the Geulah Shlema b'mira b'yameinu, amen.
This week's parasha talks about the death of the sons of Aharon HaKohen, Nadav and Avihu. It was a terrible tragedy because they were both the successors of the Kohen Gadol. And everyone was looking at them, at their future leaders. But the worst part was the fact that Aharon himself, Aharon HaKohen, lost his two children on the happiest day of his life. The day of his coronation as a Kohen Gadol. The day that he was waiting for 80 years. And Hashem took them away. But Vaidom Aharon. Aharon was silent. Aharon took it in. This past Friday, the entire Klal Israel felt the exact same way. I am still trying to picture in my head how in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, and I have a lot of family there, sending pictures of the Seudat Purim, everyone gathering, everyone sameach, everyone dancing, rejoicing just before Shabbat, and hearing the most terrible news of the loss of the Gadol Ador, Rabbi Haim Kanievsky. I can't imagine what it felt like over there. But I do know that I'm not the only one who felt the pain. When you hear that 750,000 people are walking down the street of Yerushalayim yesterday, in Bnei Brak, he connected with everyone. Chilonim, Haredim, Sephardim, Ashkenazim. I don't care what kind of a hat he was wearing. I don't care what Nosah he was praying. He was a Gadol Ador for everyone. Because he had Torah. Because his whole life was about Torah. This is why the pain was so real. But most importantly, his Torah was not selfish. His Torah was not just in his very humble, simple house in Bnei Brak. His Torah touched the world. Everyone was coming to his home to seek for advice, to find clarity, to get the beracha. Religious, not religious, important people. People in the Knesset, prime ministers, and so on. Because that Torah was not stuck in the books. That Torah was truly alive. And we could, and we should cry. But we also have to know that there is a Gemara in Masechet Kiddushin that says, כשמת רבי עקיבא נולד רבי, כשמת רבי נולד רב יהודה, כשמת רב יהודה נולד רבה, כשמת רבה נולד רב אשה. ללמדך שאין צדיק נפטר מן העולם עד שנברא צדיק כמותו. שנאמר, וזרח השמש ובא השמש. Shlomo HaMelech writes in Kohelet, we have sunset and we also have sunrise. עד שלא כבתה שמשו של עלי, זרחה שמשו של שמואל הרמתי. All these rabbis who passed away, someone came up. Another Gadol Hador was born. Another man stepped up. And this Gemara is very surprising, because I always thought that the day of the passing of the Gadol Hador was the day that the next Gadol Hador was born, literally born as a baby. But it doesn't work out, because when you look at the example, Eli and Shemuel, Shemuel Hanavi was very much alive when Eli HaKohen passed away. So I want to tell you a chidush today, Rabotai, that I think is true. Be'ezrat Hashem. We're not talking about physical birth. We are talking about spiritual birth. The day of the passing of a tzaddik, the day of the passing of the Gadol Hador, everyone gets a tremendous energy. It is in the air. And Borei Olam is asking the question, who wants to be next? Who wants to be inspired? Who wants to grow? And those Hachamim stepped up. When Eli disappeared, Shemuel said, I have to be there for my people. And the same thing happened with all these Tanaim and Amoraim. And by the way, this is not new. Many years ago, I remember reading, and I couldn't find the source, that Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom, passed away on that day. His neshama was split within the 600,000 neshamot of Am Yisrael, because each person took something from Moshe Rabbeinu. There is a tremendous shefa, a tremendous energy, spiritual energy when the tzaddik is passing away. And we need to step up. We need to grab it. We need to realize that it's our turn to be here for one another. But I also must tell you that the fact that he passed away on Purim, Shushan Purim, is a tremendous lesson for us. I want to share with you a personal story that you will not hear elsewhere. It's my story. It's our story. And I don't think I told this to anyone. I was in yeshiva in Eretz Israel for 3 years. A prestigious yeshiva in the city of Hadera called Knesset Yitzhak. Rabbi Yoshua Ehrenberg. And came the time that I was going out for Shidduchim. It was in the year 2000. And I went out with this girl. Very good family. Her father was a rabbi in France. And we got along. We did it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. It was serious. I liked her. It was great. And came the time that the parents had to meet before we finalized it. So my parents came, and we had this family gathering. It was in a hotel in Tel Aviv somewhere. We sat there, and I thought it went well, but it didn't. It did not go well. And after that meeting, my father told me, this girl is not for you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, she's not for you. I'm telling you straight. In my head, I thought that was just next step, engagement, wedding. He said, she's not for you, I'm telling you. Now, I'm a little bit stubborn sometimes. And I told my father, I disagree. I think she is the one. And if you want, let's go to Rabbi Haim Kanievsky, Alav Shalom. And that's exactly what we did. We went together to Bnei Brak, Rehov Rashbam, 23. And I wrote my question in my own words on a piece of paper. Here is a situation. I think she is the right one. My father thinks otherwise. Whatever the rabbi says is what I'm going to do. My own words. I went into the room. I saw Reb Haim sitting there. I was lucky enough that he took the time to look at my paper. And I saw that he was really paying attention, reading word by word. And then he looked up. And he said, no. And I don't know why. But I said, I had maybe this chutzpah as a young boy. I said, why? Why not? What's wrong? He said, no. Bracha v'atzlacha. And I just left with that no. And the bracha, bua. On my way back home, I was crying the whole entire trip. I couldn't believe it. But in my heart, I knew that the answer was no. It's not going to happen. And I had to move on next. The same day I called the Shadchan, and I said, my decision is that it's not going to work out. Baruch Hashem, this girl today is married, she has children, she's happy. But the answer was no. This was in the year 2000. But here is the next part of the story. You probably have seen videos of Reb Haim and his tzaddiket, the Rabbanit Kanievsky, his wife, who was also very involved in helping out Am Yisrael. This was the year 2005, 5 years later. I was already in New York, learning in Haim, Berlin. I don't want to miss any detail. But I didn't have any family here. No parents. I was in yeshiva, and we had to look for families during Shabbat to spend Shabbat with. One way or another, I heard about a very nice rabbi speaking French, who was very welcoming. His wife cooked amazingly, and as a yeshiva bocher, that's what you want to hear. And I met them in a Sheva Brachot. Went to their house. Seudat Shelomo b'sha'ato. Felt like paradise, like Gan Eden. And I told his wife, the Rabbanit, I'm going to come to you for Shabbat. You know that, right? In my bold way, nicely. She said, of course, anytime. In the meantime, my brother got married. And it took me a little more than a month to pick up the phone and to call back this family to come over for Shabbat. That Shabbat that I finally decided to come over, I happened to realize that there was a new guest in the house that I've never seen before. They had a daughter who just came back from Eretz Israel. That's right. I'm going to reassure you. Nothing happened. We did not exchange number. There was no flirt. It was all appropriate. But it was in the back of my head. It took a few months. I'm going to skip on the details. Till the Shadchan came in the middle and said, maybe that's a good idea. We went out. A month later, we were engaged. But listen to what happened. Because this girl, before she came to America, she went to the house of Reb Haim Kanievsky. She asked for a bracha, for a shidduch. And the Rabbanit, Hatzadika Aleha Shalom, said to her, if you take upon yourself to learn 2 halachot of Lashon Hara per day, and obviously to keep your mouth away from Lashon Hara, your Hatan will knock on your door. You won't have to look. He'll come to you. The first Shabbat that she came home was the first Shabbat that I went to her house. You understand who we lost? This is not Torah from the books. This is Torah Haim. This is real. This is why every Jewish heart was affected. But like I said, there is hope. There is hope because Reb Haim, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, passed away on Purim. Do you know what really happened on Purim? When we asked the question, how was your Purim? And yeah, we're going to talk about the parties, Mishlochei Manot, the Simcha, the Achdut. Great. You're right, you're right, you're right, and you're right. But Rabotai, there is something else that happened on Purim that is so far more important. We think that Kabbalat HaTorah happened on Shavuot. But the Gemara in Masechet Megillah says, Kiyemu v'kibbelu ha-Yehudim alehem ve'al zar'am. Kiyemu ma shekibbelu kvar. There was a second Kabbalat HaTorah on the day of Purim. What kind of Kabbalat HaTorah? Me'ahava, with love. That's true. I also recall that the Kabbalat HaTorah on Shavuot was with love because Am Yisrael said, Na'aseh v'nishma. Now yes, you're right. There is a midrash that says, Kafa alehem ahar kegigit. Kadosh Baruch Hu took the mountain, put it on top of Am Yisrael, so they had no choice. But listen to what the Midrash Tanchuma says. Am Yisrael was ready on Shavuot to accept the Torah shebichtav me'ahava, The Torah that we have in the Aron HaKodesh, the written Torah, no problem. Every Shabbat, we'll take it out, we'll read it, we'll learn it, we'll enjoy it. But there is one Torah that is much harder to accept. Do you know which one? Torah Shebe'al Peh. Do you know who's in charge of Torah Shebe'al Peh? I'm going to say that word. The rabbis, the Chachamim, they know better. And that was very hard to accept. That we always had struggle. And I'll show it to you. The Megillah. Mordechai says, don't go to the Mishteh Achashverosh. And the Jews say, Rabbi, it's kosher. It's okay. The Torah says it's okay. But your rabbi says no. Your rabbi says that it's not kosher. But I checked the Hashgacha. Everything checks out. What's the problem? These rabbis. That's what happened. These rabbis, להשמיד, להרוג ולאבד את כל היהודים. קיימו וקיבלו. What did Am Yisrael accept again? The Torah is not just in the books. The Torah is living among us. And when we see a Talmid Chacham, when we see a Tzaddik, kiss his feet. Realize who you're dealing with. The Gemara says we should be laughing at those standing up for the Sefer Torah and not standing up for a Sefer Torah high. A rabbi is passing next to you. How dare you sitting down? For the Torah you would be sitting down? Yeah, but Torah Shebe'al Peh is not the same. That's what happened on Purim, Rabotai. They finally listened to Mordechai. Mordechai says, 3 days fast. 3 days fast? It's not in the calendar. Tzumu alai ve'al tochelu ve'al tishtu sheloshet yamim laila vayom. Esther said so, and it's my decision. And they all did it. They all listened. Kiyemu v'kibelu haYehudim. Reb Haim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik v'Kadosh Livracha, passed away on Purim to remind us of what it means, Torah Shebe'al Peh. When we ask a question to a rabbi, and you don't like the answer, I didn't like that answer. I was crying. I thought it was over. I thought I missed it. He knows better. Accept it. Realize that he is closer to Borei Olam, that he knows better. This is who we lost. This clarity, this krevut to Borei Olam. Mi yiten lanu temurato. How are we going to recover? Who are we going to ask? But we have to believe. כשמת רבי עקיבא נולד רבי. כשמת רבי נולד רב יהודה. And as we speak today, it's time to step up. It's time to realize that it's up to us to make that difference by learning Torah and by committing to Torah. And most importantly, not the Torah of the books, the Torah of the Chachamim. To respect them, to listen to them, to be nichna. When I open a Gemara and I don't understand, it's not the problem of the Gemara. This rabbi makes sense. I don't. And if I have a problem, maybe I have to go to the mikveh. Maybe I have to check the type of kashrut that I'm using. Maybe I have to watch the way I talk. Nothing is wrong with the Gemara. It's me. Emunat Chachamim, Abotai. And I speak for myself first. If we go that road, if we take this path, then Purim will make sense. And you know what comes after Purim? That's right. Less than a month, Pesach. Pesach is Zeman Herutenu. Pesach is Zeman HaGeula. And again, I'm telling myself, we have a little less than a month to get ready. And we need to ask Borei Olam, who else are we going to lose? Those Gedolei Hador that we need more than ever. We can't afford anymore. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu take the passing of this tzaddik as a kapara on the entire Am Yisrael. May he beg Borei Olam for the Mashiach to come. Reb Haim was always talking about the Geulah as a halacha lema'aseh, not just as a potential. May Hashem yomar letzarotenu dai, uva letzion goel bimhera v'yamenu amen. תהיה נשמתו תרורה בצרור החיים, אמן.